Role-playing games introduced something that was previously unheard of in any form of storyline-based media. The character, the protagonist, gained agency. Agency on a meta level over their own story and how it's going to play out. What do I mean? Let's start at the beginning. From the earliest times of our civilization, storytelling has been accompanying us, and even the oldest stories share the same structure, the so-called 5-act structure. But what is it, and how does it relate to TTRPGs? Before we venture into that topic together, let me start this essay by saying that whether you're a writer, a scriptwriter, whether you play TTRPGs daily, or you've never written anything, or maybe never had a chance to play TTRPGs, I still think you'll find some validity in what I have to say today. I also split the video into chapters, so if you want to skip ahead to the parts that interest you the most, go ahead and do just that. My aim with this essay is to share my thoughts and my experience about storytelling and about building stories. By making this video, I wholeheartedly invite you to discussion. Maybe you'll learn something from me and I want to learn something from you. Let's broaden our horizons and the way that we tell and experience stories together. But first, we need to start at the beginning. 5-act structure for the uninitiated is a conceptualization of principles that every story ever written follows. I encourage you to read on it. I will link some text about it that I found valuable in the description below. All that you need to know as of now is that this structure can be used to describe every story ever written, ever performed, ever conceived. Some people will disagree with me on this and say that there are stories that subvert the structure, do not abide by its rules whatsoever, or just, change it all up. I am of an opinion that if we look at the structure as a way of, structurizing the storylines of a given narrative, or as a blueprint that will help us understand and analyze some stories, I think there is not a single narrative that you cannot view and, again, analyze through its lens. But I digress. The 5-act structure is as follows. Act 1 is introduction or exposition. We are introduced to our characters, we get to know the world of the story and, the setup for what's going to be going on. Then there's Act 2, rising action. We're introduced to the stakes of the story, to the main struggle, and the characters uptake their journey, their task, or anything that it is they're supposed to do in the story, and continue to do that, start to do that through different struggles and challenges they meet on the way. And then we get to Act 3, or culmination. It's a point in the story where the stakes are the highest. The characters come to a point that is, that the whole of Act 2 has been leading up to, and have the final test, the final struggle that will define the outcome of the story, usually, save the world or something like that. Then there's Act 4, decreasing action, or as I like to call it, consequences. Act 4 encompasses everything that comes after the culmination, everything that the character has to deal with after they've made their big decision, they've defeated their big foe, or something like that. Usually in stories, that's the point, that's the act in which everything starts to either go well for the character, or if it's a dramatic story, everything starts to go poorly for the main character. And then we have the final act, Act 5, which is the finale, or as I like to call it, reflection. The dust is settled, the final battle is fought, all the struggles are behind us, all is usually in stories revealed, and the character has a chance to look back on the road they've paved. We, as an audience, have a chance, we are allowed a catharsis, and we have a chance to reflect on the story which is witnessed. It is important to notice that this is a structure, right? A wide berth path. You can change it, you can subvert it. There are stories that make certain acts longer, that change up the order of acts. Usually, like classically, Act 2 is the longest one. Act 3 is usually just one scene, but even that can change. I still think that there needs to be a structure to fall back upon if we want to subvert it, if we want to stray off of it, or just abide by its principles, or just abide by its principles. Right. Now that we've got all that out of the way, let's circle back to role-playing games and how they interact and, in my opinion, redefine the 5-act structure as a whole. My dear friend Mary, that has been playing RPGs with me for over 4 years, is an academic composer and musicologist, and she is of a firm opinion that RPGs as a art form, because they are an art form, reach the rank of, I have it in my notes, Gesamtkunstwerk. Oh, Gesamtkunstwerk. Yes, or total artwork. This term is associated with Richard Wagner, the opera composer, and it's the total artwork, the universal artwork. Wagner was composing, trying to create this all-encompassing art form or achieve the synthesis of arts. Let's see now. If you've never played RPGs, I will try to explain it now. TTRPG is a collaborative narrative experience that follows a story playing out in the theater of mind of all the participants with some additional game elements and random outcomes, usually dictated by mechanics in the form of dice. It's basically a grown-up version of make-believe, just with dice and some additional trauma. That's my definition. I know it's quite lengthy, so let's look to the Cambridge Dictionary and what it has to say about RPGs. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, TTRPG is a game played around a table or online in which a group of people create and play the part of characters in a story that develops as the game is played. That works as well. So, while indulging in a TTRPG session, you take on a role of a character, a performer, an actor, a scriptwriter, a cinematographer, but also the audience, the consumer of the story. Usually, TTRPG sessions are accompanied with music. People use lighting to evoke certain feel of given scenes. People even engage other senses, like scent, just to, immerse themselves in this experience. So I personally think that given these multifaceted role that you take on while playing TTRPGs and the connection between many forms of storytelling gives us something that is, if it's not the synthesis of arts, is as close to the total artwork as you can get. Of course, as any story, the story of a TTRPG campaign, like, for example, Critical Role narrative or Dimension 20 narrative that you may have seen, can also be described using the 5-act structure. The beauty is that, unlike any other storytelling medium, this 5-act structure emerges during play. It's not predetermined. It is conceived by the people performing the game, playing the game, by all of the participants. And I think that's something beautiful. Now that we've established all of that about the 5-act structure and TTRPGs, we can finally talk in detail about how it is that they interact with each other and how I think that TTRPGs redefine the classical 5-act structure of storytelling. Let's consider a table of players. If on that scale, every player takes on a role of a character, an audience member, a cinematographer, and an actor, all of that I've stated before, suddenly these roles are, switched or maybe merged into one. Suddenly, a character is a scriptwriter of their own story, the actor is sitting with the audience, the scriptwriter is living through the story that they are writing, and the audience are basically performing for themselves. This means that at any given point in the story, the future, or like how the story is going to play out, cannot be foreseen. It is unknown until it's going to happen during play. Of course, you can have some plans, you can have some expectations, you can have some predictions of what's going to happen, some big story elements, but the final way of how things are going to play out in your story in a TTRPG is always a mystery until the very moment it comes to life. It is written, it is performed by the table with a group of people that you're playing with. I think there is something magical about that. You know, usually when you write a script, many prominent writers or script writers follow this method. Plan first, story second. You know, at the time that the story is being written, there is the blueprint for the story. The main narrative points are fixed, predetermined, and planned ahead. There is a lot of advice online to not start writing, not write a single word of your novel that you're trying to write until you have all the pieces planned out, or all the characters planned out. You have a big, lines of connections and stuff. I was following that advice when I was trying to write. I was even trying to follow that advice when I first started to play RPGs. But TTRPGs are much more akin to improvisational theater. The actors are, setting up some baselines, setting up their playground, their sandbox that they are then building with, impromptu, creating the story on the stage for you. But even improvisational theater, whether it's satirical or not, does not, in my opinion, achieve the same level of the story having own self-meta agency over itself as TTRPGs, because usually even the performers, like in a improvisational theater, take on some roles dictated by the act, dictated by the story that they want to tell, dictated by the ideas of the director. The actors usually, perform in a much larger way, in a much prominent way than players of a TTRPG session do. The players create their characters from scratch, and there is nobody else than the player deciding what the character will do and how their story will progress. And as I said before, the line between character and the performer and the player is very thin. Talk about method acting, right? Now, I don't want to say that anybody playing an RPG needs to be a trained actor or a method actor, or that you should be, or that you should try to be one. That's absolutely not the case. And I think that the amount of roleplay you engage with is totally irrelevant to my point. Whether you fully embrace your character and roleplay it at the table, or you just describe their story and what they're doing, it's totally irrelevant. Still, it's you in the director's seat. It's you in the actor's shoes. It's you as the audience. You are the final arbiter of how the story will go and how it will progress. There is nothing else influencing you. You're just creating your own story with your friends at the table in the very moment. And you don't need to think about anybody else's ideas because it's your character. It's your story. Of course, there needs to be communication at the table, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And there is also the randomization aspect, but I'm not touching that in this video. Why? Well, because some RPG games do not even have randomization, or have very light mechanical randomization, do not use dice. And even the, the systems, the mechanics that use a lot of dice, and the dice have a heavy say in what happens at the table, even with these games, it's ultimately down to the players, down to the people playing the game to interpret those results. So in my opinion, the dice do not really shape the story. They're just pushing us in different directions and giving us curveballs that we need to work with to create this story. That's another element of the story, like telling itself, emerging through play, that I think is the true, epitomized magic of TTRPGs. But how does all of that relate to the 5-act structure? Well, there is the story element I've been talking about. Player character stories, the campaign stories during play that you're playing through is also, is following or can be categorized by the 5-act structure, right? Player characters are introduced Player characters have their own struggles that they go through. Player characters have their own final battle, their, decisive moment. They face their greatest adversity in a climactic moment at the table. Player characters deal with the consequences of their own decisions, and usually the biggest consequences are after this climactic moment, a battle or confrontation. And also the player characters can reflect back upon the campaign after it ends, or maybe at the end of the session, at the end of a chapter of a campaign. They can look back where they came from. But, and here's the kicker, unlike any other art form, it is entirely up to the characters, to the players, when and how these acts, these moments take place, where they begin and end. And this is exactly how TTRPGs redefine the 5-act structure. So, how can we use that redefinition to our advantage when crafting stories? Whether it's plans for an RPG campaign or just, writing a novel or a screenplay. Let me start with TTRPGs this time. Many people shy away from any kind of structure or planning when playing TTRPGs. There is something known as a railroad. That's a situation where usually the player leading the game master, bends all the narrative threads, bends all the players' decisions to some points that they planned before the session, to fixed narrative points they want to get to, like a checklist. And it's usually not a pleasant experience. It's considered not very healthy, and people, at least from my perspective in our hobby, usually shy away from any kind of structure in their RPG sessions because they do not want to railroad their players. They do not want to be called railroaders. But I don't think that setting expectations, setting up plans, and, importantly, communicating them with other players and with your game master is taking away player agency. Not at all. We've been doing that with my group for the last 1.5 years. We're trying to introduce it every session more and more and more. And I think that it works great. Setting expectations for what you want your character to do and struggle with during a story and communicating them with the table and with the game master is a great way to enhance the story. And in my opinion, the 5-act structure is a perfect tool to do just that. Entertain me for a second. I want to introduce my character through a certain motive. That's my Act 1, right? My character will probably struggle with X, Y, and Z. That is my Act 2. Okay, wait. I think that something that's coming upon us, or something that's happening in this very moment, I think that is the culmination of my character's story. That's my Act 3. That's where everything changes, right? Okay, now that has happened, my character needs to deal with this and that and figure out all of it. That's my Act 4. And now that we are ending the adventure, at the end of the road, my character can look back. And they end up in a place of, that's my Act 5. I'm ready for another adventure. We have agency, we have spontaneity, we have cooperation with other storytellers and performers, or just players at your table. Next time you have the opportunity, give it a try. Try to consciously look at the story that you're telling at the table, at the story of your character. Try to consciously look at the story of your table, at the story of your character, through the lens of the 5-act structure, in a 5-act based way. Of course, let those points move. As I said, subvert the structure. Elongate certain acts if you want to, or shorten them if you want to. Decide, let the magic of RPGs guide you and decide in the moment, okay, that is my Act 3. Okay, I think that my struggle is going to be something and something and something. Doing that, in my opinion, will make the TTRPG experience the more fulfilling and exciting. So give it a try. Now, when it comes to what writers can implement from TTRPGs into their traditionally written media, I think it's the agency of the characters. If you've ever written a piece of narrative, maybe you've stumbled upon a moment when a character, not you, the writer, but a character, made a decision, right? When something in the narrative just clicked into place without your conscious thought or planning, just because it was fitting for the character, for the story that you're writing. I've definitely experienced something like that. Lean into it. Try to, use it and let your characters tell the story for you. I think there is an untold marvel when a story basically writes itself, tells itself. I even think, in my personal opinion, that this is a hallmark of a story that could be considered truly great. So the next time you sit down to write that novel or screenplay you've been wanting to write, try to give up control. Let your characters change your plans and take you places you did not expect. You will figure it out on the way. You can always lean on the structure. It's called a structure for a reason. It's there to guide you and to help you streamline everything that you need to have a finished product to start recording your movie or start writing your novel. Just don't be afraid to change things up. Let the structure ask you questions. What's happening now? What will happen then? Where are you going with this? But maybe try to let your characters answer for themselves. You don't need to always be the one that's doing the answering. Give it a try. So, to summarize all I've been talking about here, if you're a writer, consider TTRPGs and how they approach storylines, and maybe it will enhance your writing style. Try to give your characters more agency. Let them live through your story and let your story tell itself. Just give up a little bit of control and maybe just go with it. And if you're a TTRPG player, give 5 acts a try. Next time you have a chance to play in a campaign, in a session, see for yourself if thinking of the campaign story, of your character's story in a 5-act based way will elevate the way you navigate your adventure. Maybe it will make you feel less confused or lost at some points in your adventure because you have something to look forward to. You have something that, okay, what am I doing here? What am I doing during that session? Well, I said that my character is going to struggle with this and that and this and that, so maybe I should engage one of those struggles. Maybe I should try to overcome it. Maybe I should try to tell the story of how my character fails to overcome it. Give it a try. And let me know in the comments below, what do you think? That was a lot to go through. That was a lot of spewing just, thoughts out of my brain. I hope you learned something new. I hope you found my take on it interesting or at least entertaining. If you want to see more essays like that, which I will be recording once a month, give me a subscription, everything, do the YouTube stuff. It helps me out a lot. It motivates me to do it. And I hope that we'll meet again and talk about something else. Cheers.